There is a strange kind of heartbreak that doesn't begin when someone leaves. It begins when you realize you still feel connected to someone who is already gone. For demisexual people, letting go can become something far more complicated than simply accepting a breakup. Because when attraction depends on emotional connection, losing the person can feel like losing the entire emotional world that made attraction possible. And that creates a dangerous question. If it took you this long to feel something that deep, how are you supposed to stop feeling it? The answer is uncomfortable. Sometimes you are not holding on to the person. You are holding on to what the connection awakened inside you. And those are not the same thing. Demisexual attraction is often misunderstood as simply being slow to fall in love. But the deeper reality can be much more complicated. When emotional intimacy becomes connected to attraction, a relationship can acquire enormous psychological weight. The person is no longer just someone you dated. They become attached to memories, trust, vulnerability, safety, routines, private conversations, and the rare experience of finally feeling something that did not feel forced. So when the relationship ends, your mind is not processing one loss. It is processing several losses simultaneously. The person, the connection, the possibility, and the version of yourself that existed around them. That is where letting go becomes difficult, because your brain can understand that the relationship is over while another part of you keeps waiting for the emotional connection to become meaningful again. You remember the moment they understood you, the conversation that lasted until morning, the first time you felt safe enough to stop performing. The first time attraction appeared naturally instead of being something you had to convince yourself to feel. Those memories become evidence. Evidence that what happened was real. And because it was real, your mind begins making a dangerous assumption. Maybe something real cannot truly be over. That is where attachment can quietly turn into emotional archaeology. You start digging through the past. Their messages, their tone, their old photographs, the exact moment they changed, the conversation where everything supposedly went wrong. You search for the missing explanation. Not necessarily because you want them back, but because your mind wants the story to make sense. Modern dating makes this even worse. A breakup used to create distance. Now distance is optional. Their profile remains available. Their photos remain visible. Their online activity appears randomly. A new relationship can become visible within seconds. And suddenly, healing becomes a psychological experiment you never agreed to participate in. You tell yourself you are only checking, but checking becomes monitoring. Monitoring becomes comparison. Comparison becomes emotional surveillance. And emotional surveillance keeps the attachment alive. Because every new piece of information gives your brain something else to interpret. Did they look happier? Did they move on faster? Did they delete that picture? Why did they like that post? Are they seeing someone? Do they miss me? The internet gives heartbreak something it never had before. Infinite evidence to obsess over. And for someone who already forms attraction through emotional connection, that constant access can make detachment brutally difficult. Because you are not just remembering them. You are repeatedly reopening the emotional pathway connected to them. And sometimes the hardest part is not missing the person. It is missing the version of yourself that could finally feel attraction. That distinction matters. Because if attraction is rare for you, losing someone you were deeply attracted to can create a terrifying thought. What if that was my only chance? What if I never feel this again? What if nobody else ever gets close enough? What if I waited years to feel something like this, and now it is gone? That fear can make an old relationship feel more valuable than it actually was. Scarcity changes perception. When something feels rare, the mind starts protecting it, even when the relationship itself was hurting you. This is why some people remain emotionally attached to someone they intellectually know they should leave behind. They are not necessarily choosing the pain. They are protecting the memory of emotional possibility. And sometimes that becomes a form of emotional survival. You replay the good moments because they prove that the connection existed. You minimize the incompatibility because accepting it means accepting that something deeply meaningful still could not work. That realization can be devastating, because something can be genuine and still be wrong for you. Something can be profound and still be temporary. Someone can understand you deeply and still be unable to love you in the way you need. That is one of the hardest truths about attachment. Meaning does not guarantee permanence, and intensity does not guarantee compatibility. But the mind hates unfinished emotional stories, so it creates alternate endings. Maybe if I had communicated better. Maybe if they had healed. Maybe if the timing were different. Maybe if we tried again. Maybe the person I miss is still there somewhere. Maybe. That single word can keep someone emotionally attached for years. Because maybe never gives you enough certainty to grieve. Keeps the door psychologically unlocked. And that is where letting go becomes less about forgetting someone, and more about accepting that the future you imagined with them will not happen. You are not only grieving what happened, you are grieving what never got the chance to happen. The relationship you imagined. The conversations you thought you would eventually have. The intimacy you believed would deepen. The ordinary future that existed only inside your head. That kind of grief is invisible. Nobody sees it. Nobody knows you are mourning a future that never technically existed. So you continue functioning. You work. You socialize. You laugh. You date. You appear fine. But internally, some part of you is still emotionally comparing everyone to one person. And this creates another trap. You meet someone new. They are attractive, kind, interesting, available. But the emotional connection is not there immediately. And your mind interprets that absence as proof. They are not the same. Of course they are not. Nobody is. But when you are comparing a new person to an already emotionally loaded connection, the new person is competing against years of accumulated meaning. That is not a fair competition. The past has context. The present has potential. And potential always feels weaker than memory, especially when memory has been edited. Because heartbreak does something strange. It can turn emotional pain into selective nostalgia. You remember the intensity. You forget the uncertainty. You remember the closeness. You forget the moments you felt alone beside them. You remember being chosen. You forget how often you questioned whether you were. Memory does not always preserve reality. Sometimes it preserves what you are afraid to lose. And eventually, the real psychological challenge becomes brutally simple. Can you accept that something mattered without needing it to continue? Can you admit that the connection changed you without believing that it must define your future? Can you stop treating rarity as destiny? Because rare does not mean irreplaceable. And letting go does not mean pretending you never cared. It means refusing to keep living inside a relationship that only exists in memory. The deepest form of release is not emotional numbness. It is when the memory can remain true without remaining in control. You can remember them. You can miss them. You can acknowledge that what happened mattered, and still stop waiting. Because sometimes the reason you cannot let go is not that they were your only person. It is that they were the first person who showed you what your heart was capable of feeling. And once you understand that, the story changes. They did not create your capacity for connection. They revealed it, which means what you felt was never completely theirs to take away. That connection happened through you. That vulnerability happened through you. That capacity to feel deeply was always yours. And perhaps letting go was never about becoming someone who feels less. Maybe it is about finally realizing that you can feel deeply without staying attached to what is gone. Because the goal is not to erase the person. The goal is to stop building your future around their absence. And eventually you reach a quiet realization. You can love what happened without waiting for it to happen again. You can honor the connection without worshiping the memory. And you can let someone leave your life without taking your ability to connect with them. Because the rarest thing was never that you found one person you could finally feel for. The rarest thing was discovering that you were capable of feeling that deeply at all. And once you understand that, letting go stops meaning losing the only connection you will ever have. It starts meaning making room for the next one.